Hi everybody, it's Ryan from Ryviews.com, and today I'm doing my second audio podcast, which I've decided, in my similar vein to how I name everything else, I'm going to call this the RyCast. So despite the fact that the first one was not called a RyCast, this is now RyCast number 2. For those of you keeping score at home, stop, because that's creepy and weird. For everyone else, RyCast number 2. This time, I want to talk more about video games, which should be obvious at this point, I suppose. Talking about some of the video games I played as a child, and played, in this case, is a relative term for a large portion of these games I'm going to talk about. But I also wanted to bring up the fact that at some point I'm probably going to stop running out of, or I'm going to run out of video game topics to talk about. So there's a chance sometimes these RyCasts might divert into other topics. For the foreseeable future, they will be all about video games, just like all my other stuff in general. Game Ryviews is kind of in the title of my website. So, anywho, RyCast, about games that I played as a child. Don't know what the clever pun name's going to be yet. I'll probably come up with that as I'm putting this somewhere onto YouTube or a blogger. So, stay tuned for that, or you've probably already read it. So, there you go. When I was a kid, I started my video game experience very young because I used to watch my father play Super Mario World, or Super Mario Brothers, whichever, the first one on the NES. I used to watch him play it, and I used to get very, very excited. And I was, of course, too terrible to get past, anything like the second world. Because games back then, of course, were much, much harder than they are today in general. Because the only way they could get 20, 30 hours of playtime is to make the game impossibly hard, so that you have to replay it a million times to be able to beat it. So it was a big deal whenever I saw him get anywhere meaningfully far into the game. A really big deal when I saw him beat the game. And so at a very early age, I was kind of addicted to watching that kind of thing. And so I also had an older brother, so it was a big deal for me for a long time to be able to watch someone who has more skills than I do be able to beat a game, which I think is why I still enjoy watching Let's Play videos more than the average bear. And yeah, I just said that because I grew up doing that. My brother was always better at video games than I was growing up, so it was much easier for me to watch him beat a game than it was for me to play it. The same holds true when I was growing up playing Zelda games, like playing Ocarina of Time. I was terrible at that game, so the only way I ever actually got to see the ending before I was much, much older was to watch my brother beat it. So that was pretty fun. Early on, I used to play lots of RTS games too, because I enjoyed kind of the slow atmosphere of it, where you could kind of build up and then slowly move forward. It wasn't action oriented. It was much more kind of at your own pace. And when I played StarCraft, which of course was one of those games that was way too hard for me to play, I always used the cheat codes because I was terrible. And so at that point, it gave me a different scenario where I didn't have to watch somebody beat it. Now I could watch myself beat it using God mode and infinite money, which was fantastic. Which is another reason why I hated the Command & Conquer series, because while I love those games, they never had cheat codes. At least they weren't published or anything. I don't think they had cheat codes, and I couldn't find them. So whenever I tried to play those, I just got my ass handed to me. Harshly, too. It was terrible. And so I never got anywhere near beating those games when I was a kid. Since then, I have gone back and I've beaten Command & Conquer Red Alert, which is a difficult game, and I've beaten Tiberian Sun, but I've still never beaten the first game. I cannot beat that. Even in my current state, I cannot beat it. I haven't really tried lately. I tried when I was in college, so maybe I'd be better now, but I'm guessing I wouldn't be. Because some of those games, once again, are just too damn difficult. I mean, they had to beef up the difficulty to make up for the lack of graphics and the lack of content, because they had to fit on like a floppy disk, Along those lines, I used to also play SimCity on a floppy disk, where I would use the cheat codes. But at any rate, so sometime around middle school is when I started actually being able to play games and beat games without having to use cheat codes. I remember playing through Banjo-Kazooie, and I got pretty far in the game. And I couldn't quite beat it. Of course, I couldn't perfect it. Nowadays, I played it about a year ago, and I perfected the game. That was a big deal for me. But back then, I was able to actually get to the ending, which was a big deal in the first place. And then that's one of the first games I remember actually beating the boss. The same thing for Donkey Kong 64, which is a remarkably similar game, If you haven't played the two, playing one is basically like playing the other, except you change a bear for a monkey, ape, I guess, whatever, a primate. But in general, they're basically the same game. So I was able to beat both of them, and that was a big deal for me. And then I around that same time, I was trying to play games like Rogue Squadron. A little while later, playing Star Wars Battlefront. I don't know quite when it happened, but at some point I went from being this terrible, just disgustingly bad video game player to actually being able to hold my own. And I think it was sometime in my mind around when I started playing Halo. Bringing it back around to what I was talking about the last time, where if you listen to my first podcast, RyCast now, retroactively, I sucked at Halo to begin with. And I think at some point when I started dealing with other players, I realized that playing a campaign or playing an AI has nothing to do with playing real people. And so playing real people kind of upped my skill level quite a bit. Because you kind of are forced to jump into this area where you are fighting people that are immensely better than you. And even if you get your ass handed to you multiple times, it still kind of elevates your playstyle because you have to deal with that. You have to kind of move faster and think faster and react faster. And after I did that, I feel like I started getting better at video games because I realized the skill level I needed to actually go through these games. And I think even with games that had no multiplayer, like going back to a Zelda game, which is always single player, it's a completely different game than any kind of first-person shooter. Because I learned those skills playing real people, I learned how to beat a real game, even on my own. And I think that was a really cool thing to learn, albeit frustrating, obviously. So I guess that's kind of the point I was trying to make. I guess. I don't know. I didn't really go into this with an end in mind, which I think was definitely stupid of me, if I do say so myself. But I found an ending accidentally, so I'll go ahead and end here. Thanks, everybody, for listening, that is. Didn't say that quite right. Visit www.ryviews.com for more content, and don't forget to subscribe. And feel free to leave in the comments. I would encourage you to comment about when you stopped sucking at video games. Presumably you weren't awesome at 4 years old or something either. Maybe you were. Tell me about that too, I guess. But yeah, so leave comments discussing the topic or whatever you want to discuss, I guess, or, how much you hate hearing my voice. I feel like if you did hate my voice that much, you probably would have stopped listening a long time ago, but who knows? So yeah, leave comments. Thanks for listening. Ryviews.com. I'm Ryan. Thanks, everybody.